So, unlocking life's success code, it's about teaching our children not just about responsibilities and not that it should feel like a chore, but a ways to empower our future and our children's future. Today, we're going to be talking into another stream of things about empowering our young generation and generations to come, are talking with people who have autism. And autism can hit people on all different spectrums. And today we're going to be going deep into it and discussing how we can empower others to empower themselves. And that's really what's the way it's supposed to be. Hello, Nicole, and welcome to Let's Get Real today. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing wonderful. It's a beautiful, bright day, but cold day in Toronto, but I'm happy.
You know, it's really, well, for me, it's really cold here. It's probably not as cold as where you are, but in South Carolina, it has dipped down into like the low 40s. And so all my Ugg boots are out. My kids are making fun of me. They're like, don't wear the pink ones. Those are so 2004. So I had to get out my black ones, but you know, that's what kids do. So I just roll with it.
Yes, I get it. I get it so very much. Then my kids do the same thing. But here's the difference. I don't even listen to them because what old is new, and that's what it's really supposed to be about. And if you enjoy it and it makes you feel good and it makes you walk a little bit prouder or stand a little taller, then it's good. It's fine.
Absolutely. And we've had our guest on before, and it was a fabulous conversation. So I'm really interested in this today. And we have Cheri Dixon on again. And today she's an educational and business consultant, and she focuses on helping organizations scale to the next level. She's also been a principal, and she was serving schools that were struggling, and she used her proven strategies to help them on their path to success. She was working in Texas and Iowa, and she noticed increased concerns from her parents that were there about children that were diagnosed with autism. And I know that this is something. I think I have a daughter, my older one. She's never been diagnosed, but honestly, I think she might have ADD. And so it's really interesting that as I started watching her and learning more and more about this, I started thinking, you know, there's something to this, and I think she might have something like that. She says many of these stem from misunderstandings of this disability, and this experience sparked a dream that one day she could bring more clarity to families and help them not just understand the disability, but to support their children through this schooling. Over the last 20 years, not 5, not 10, but 20, she has a project that has grown, and Cheri is ready to get started working on her first docu-series releasing in 2024, which, as we know, is coming up really quickly. So I myself am excited to talk about, to listen to her today, see if I can see anything that maybe resonates with me and my older daughter. So let's bring Cheri up to the stage and get her started.
Hey, ladies. How are you?
Thanks for joining us today. You're hitting a subject today that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to be here today with you, because our last conversation was fabulous. And there's nothing that I love more than a person who's educated, and especially on the subject matter. So welcome to us on Let's Get Real.
Thank you. Thank you. I loved our conversation last time. I felt like we connected so well, and just so looking forward to this, because honestly, today is kind of like a launch for me. As you mentioned in the introduction, this is something that's been on my mind and in my heart for so many years, and just a dream of being able to bring some clarity to families, to be able to just help at least one. You know, it's like that starfish story where at least you can help one. That's my intention, and I never thought this would become a reality, but here I am, really planning the foundation and getting started. So it's out in the world now. I have to do it, right?
I love it.
But it's so exciting, and it's so needed.
And for some whatever reason, autism is something that is growing, and it's scary for a lot of others. Like I've said, I've lived my whole life with it. I have two brothers that have Fragile X, which is a form of autism. And so I've lived my entire life with watching it, being involved in it. And now I'm a caregiver and as well their advocate and in some ways, their parent at this point in time in life. But we have to, let everybody know that autism has all different levels, and we'll discuss that as well as we go through. So maybe you can start by sharing with us this new project that you said is just starting. So, give us the good news.
All right, perfect. So I have had an online talk show. It does stream through Phoenix TV, which is part of the She Rises Studios production. And my talk show actually was able to stream to over 120 countries because we were able to start building that, and we got picked up with Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire. And after we went through the first few months of that building and learning and growing, the company announced that, they're looking for new projects, maybe documentaries or different kinds of things. And I had always had this dream, as I mentioned, to be able to bring something to the community meaning the world, right? Where I can use the knowledge I have, plus utilize all of the connections I've made along my journey to be able to bring some clarity about this disability, because it is, as you said, there's so many different aspects to it and so many different levels to it. And now, as we learn more, putting it into the category of neurodiversity, as you mentioned, Nicole, now ADHD and ADD kind of fall into all of that as well. So it's growing, it's becoming so big, but nonetheless, my project has kind of grown and has become so big as well. I started with this thought of, okay, my experience really is about working with school-aged children, middle school and elementary in particular, and working with those families in regard to when a child starts to exhibit maybe not typical behaviors, and where do we go and what do we do, and then working through the diagnosis and working through programming and supporting the families, because once they come into my buildings, it was always, kind of like it takes a village to raise a child, right? And you can't have one kind of system at school and then a different kind of system at home, especially for children with these disabilities. So that consistency was so important. And that was a lot of the work I did as a principal, because I wanted to be sure that my families felt comfortable with this unknown, with this new, ever changing kind of diagnosis. Maybe the diagnosis itself wasn't changing, but information about it was evolving. And so it was just very confusing to our families. And then as I started building the foundation over the last few months, I have met people like you, Glenda, and others all around the world. Just last week on Thursday, I met someone from Africa who also has a child with this disability, and shared with me how they don't allow her child to attend school because teachers are not trained enough to be able to handle some of the different behaviors and things about her child. And she now is going to be a part of this as well. So it has built to where we're not just going to be focusing on elementary and middle school students, but really becoming a series that I want to release on April 1st, because that's, Autism Awareness Month, that each week another aspect of someone's life from birth all the way up to, getting ready to prepare for death, and hope that there's something within that journey that can help somebody out there watching. So it is a big project. I am excited. I am a little bit nervous as well. Of course, people would think I was crazy if I wasn't nervous, but I know that the people I've connected with have so much knowledge to share, so many experiences, and that's what it's all about. It's not about me. It's about getting this information out to the world and having an impact to help a family, to help a person, just have the best life they can possibly have.
And let's touch base on that because, that's something that for me is really important and very special is because, I understand when my brothers were born, we're going back many years. And at that point in time, we didn't have the research, we didn't have the understanding and things. And it was a very different world. But I've seen it even in today's day because at times I go out and I do speak to groups with the people who have special needs children. And the one important thing that I say is about teaching your young ones when they're home. Like education starts at the very beginning. And the beginning talks about, being in the home, giving them the responsibilities. And what I have learned that no matter who you are or what ailment you have or whatever level that whatever the level you have, there's always something that you can do, whether it's make a bed, whether it's make a sandwich. There's all different levels that each person is capable of doing. And when we start teaching those things to the younger generation, they can build as they go older. But what happens in a lot of cases, and I've seen it in my own, and I've seen it, and parents have said to me, yes, they're guilty of it, is they put their child into a little bit of a bubble, that glass bubble, because they're afraid. They're afraid that they would do something that, give them a knife that might cut them. But there's all different ways, like giving them ballistic knives, or there's all different ways of teaching them. But the more we teach is what we're doing is we actually are empowering them. And once they can do something, the confidence level that comes onto them is beautiful to see. So education starts from the beginning, not waiting until they're actually in the classroom. Agree?
I would absolutely agree. And, one of the things that I think is super important for us to just continue to communicate out to the world is that we have to keep our expectations high, right? If people hadn't believed in me and hadn't started setting the bar high for me, I know because of my home life, as a child, I would not have gotten where I was. And I think as parents, we have to remember that. There were times where I pushed my daughter maybe a little bit too hard. We had tears, but I call that the productive struggle a little bit, because if she hadn't experienced some of that while she was still in my supervision and had my support, then what was going to happen later on in life? And the one thing about, working with children with disabilities, I do not have one, so I cannot speak from the parent side, but I can say as an educator, seeing this so many times, I think we give our children reasons to not perform when we do try to protect them too much. And I'm sure it's a very scary process as a parent. I just, like I said, I'm not there. I never had to experience that. But knowing too that the rest of the world isn't going to hold them in that same regard. And part of preparing our children for success in the future, in my opinion, is also to teach them you do as much as you can so that you're not something or someone that can be ridiculed, more than, of course, there's reality and it's sad, but and I hope I'm saying that right. And I certainly don't want to ruffle feathers, but I do want parents to hear that sometimes we have to take those scary steps with our kids when they're in our control, so that when they're out of our control, they can feel that confidence and they can feel like they do matter. And that just because I have this doesn't limit me from doing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. And Cheri, I know there's a huge range from mild to severe.
Mhm.
As a parent, and I'm going to put this, like, to me, on a very low level, what would you look for that would be signs of possible ADD or ADHD? What are some of the first things that happens? And I would say, like age 5.
Mhm. Well, one thing that I think that we see as educators is, of course, the start of a school year is never the first few days, the days to say this and this and this is going on with your child. I think we have to do some observing and gathering of some information. But once kids get past, I call it the honeymoon phase, when they start to get comfortable, into their school year, you can start to just see maybe some differences in students. And just because a student is different doesn't necessarily mean there's some kind of disability, but you start to notice, and especially after you do it for a while, when you have some experience, you start to notice that the differences are a little more significant. So for example, I am someone who is an undiagnosed, I 100% believe this, ADHD person. My energy levels are always very high. I start projects that I don't always finish. I can get very overwhelmed very quickly when I see a lot in front of me. Just experienced that not too long ago, and I'm 52, so it's still out there. But you learn how to notice those things, when children start to get very frustrated very quickly, when the majority of other 5-year-olds can sit and attain to a task. That's something to start thinking, oh, something might be going on. And then it's having those conversations, with parents, because a lot of times parents are working and parents don't necessarily notice um, as many things as we do as educators, right? Because they're not looking for those things.
Right.
And, so then it's having the conversation and still having the empathy of what the parent might be experiencing when you're having that conversation. So rather than going and saying, okay, there's something wrong with your child. I mean, as a parent, I would probably be like, okay, there's going to be something wrong with you now because I'm going to take this to the next level. But it's more of, hey, I've been noticing, such and such happening. Have you noticed any of that? This might be something you might want to watch for. And getting feedback from parents over the years, they've been very appreciative as to how most of my staff and I have handled that, over the years, because it's so scary. It's so, you just don't know what to do next.
Yeah. That makes sense because the spectrum is so broad
Mm-hmm.
and certain, from nonverbal to, very mild. So I'm sure, and when I refer to my daughter, she loses everything. She can't remember where things are, and she can't concentrate on one thing to this
Mm-hmm.
day. She's all over the board. One day she's moving to Portugal, and the next she's, well, that's out, and I'm going to get a dog and travel to Africa. And I'm like, okay, let me just, I'll stay in the same place so you can always find me, but let me know where you're at. So it's just, it was just something I was glad you were coming on today because I've been thinking about her a lot lately.
Well, and I think too, as a parent, as her mom, this is something that you've worked with for years. I'm not sure how old she is, but it's normal for you, right?
It
That's a
is.
normal behavior. So it doesn't stand out to you. And so that's why I really encourage families to make sure they're partnering well with the school, no matter what, whether they suspect a disability or not. That good school and parent partnership is so important. And when you have that and you're all on the same page working as a team, that's when the child is going to receive the best education possible.
Beautiful.
But if
Beautiful.
we don't always just wait for the school to start, like I'm a believer, and we talked about this before, I'm a very firm believer in getting our children reading. And I used to do this with my brothers at an early age, and I don't know where it came from, but I believe sometimes I just have those ideas that came into my mind were, even you take a child, and that child could even be at 10 or 11, depending on their reading abilities, but take a child and bring them even to a book that's even at a lower degree than what they're capable of. And if you could go through on a nightly or daily basis where you were helping them read every single night. And even if they're able to read it, the fact that they can read it from beginning to end, and the accomplishment is that you've actually finished an entire book, it brings in that satisfaction. And you can upgrade the level as you go on, but the child being able to have gotten through what they are trying to get through and knowing that they've accomplished it brings in a lot of satisfaction and confidence for them. And that can be just continued on through the path. I even did this when, one of my kids was a very high level, my other kid wasn't as much, but that reading skill started really developing once I saw that she and I had done with my brothers the same things, that feeling so, proud of themselves that they finished something.
Absolutely. And that's why I say, and I keep emphasizing how important it is that parents partner with the school, because you're absolutely right. Not all kids are going to learn in the same way, on the same day, at the same rate. And the final project, so to speak, might not look the same, but every kid can learn. And when we're talking about children who do have these different disabilities, you're going to have a team of people at the school developing an individualized plan for them, at least here in the United States. I'm not sure how it is in Canada or the other countries, but that's how it is here. And it's a requirement, it's a law. And within that programming, it will outline specifically what students will be focused on for that next year, what kind of accommodations and or modifications that might be needed for the student. And it's important that the parent understand that in addition to participate in those meetings, because it needs to be what we do at home, what we do at school kind of comes together as a whole, gives us a whole, I call it the ball of yarn, right? Because there's so many pieces to that, but it just meshes together so that the child is set up for the most success. I think about, even my own self prior to going through my divorce. This sounds so random, but it's so true. I would go to work. I had things very organized. I had things very systematic. I was in an environment where people were very kind to each other. We would speak to each other. We were a team. And I would go home and I never knew what I was going to get with my ex-husband, so to speak. And just in that respect, and I was in my 30s, when this kind of stuff started to happen, it made me start to have some, anxiety and different kinds of things go on. And so if you think about a child that already has things going on, and then the two environments are so different, that's one more hurdle in their path, where if we can come together and really form that team, then that takes care of some of those hurdles.
And we got to give the parents, really talk to them, because it's okay to speak up. It's okay. It's really important to tell your teachers of what's going on in your home environment as well, because that way we tie all the pieces together. If you find certain things, whether it's right or it's wrong, like if you see your child is struggling, then mention that to the teacher, because that might be a key of something they don't have. In Canada, yes, we do have extra classes and all these type of things, but in the normal school years, the regular public schools, our system is that the classes are far too large. And until they can really decipher which child needs the extra help, that child can be pulled along for a little while. But if a parent can bring it out to speak up to the teacher, to the principal, or whoever needs to be, like We have to be the voice sometimes for our children, and it's very important that you don't just say, pull back because you're worried that you don't want to feel like you're being pushy or anything like that. Because I've heard that from parents before. They're afraid to stand out too much. What will they think? Doesn't matter. We have to be the voice for our children, for our families, for people who can't speak out for themselves.
I'm glad you said that, Glenda, because one of the things, in addition to working with schools and small businesses, that I also do, and I mentioned it when I was here last time, I work with educators. So I do some coaching with educators, but I also have a program for new teachers, and I call it newish teachers, within their first 3 years of being in the profession. One, so that we can try to keep them in the profession, but two, colleges, teacher preparatory programs, they teach you the textbook stuff, right? They'll teach you how to write a lesson plan. Do they teach you why you write a lesson plan? Maybe not so much. They teach you have to have rules and expectations, but do they teach you why those are important? No. And one of the things that I really emphasize in the first semester of the program, it's a year-long program or a school year-long program, is really working with parents and really talking to these new people about parents are doing the best that they can. They're the ones who know the child better than you, right? Yes, you're with them every day as the teacher for that school year, but they're with them every day of their life. They're going to know when something starts to go sideways. They're going to know if something doesn't feel right. And so we do have to work with our educators too. And it's not because they're maliciously trying not to listen to parents, but on how to partner with parents and how to really embrace when a parent says, I think something's going on. Don't just discount it and say, oh, you don't know because you're not an educator. Okay, no, but you're the mom. You know your kid, kind of a thing. So I think there's a couple of different layers to all of that. But what you say is so important. Parents have to feel comfortable. At least find one person in that school building that you can feel comfortable going in and talking to, because they can always relay it to the right people as well.
And on that same level, we also have to communicate on the different things. Like if your child has triggers and they have reactions to those triggers, a teacher, those are signs. So I can say that, and for myself, I have taught, my brothers live in a group home now and have for the last 15 years or so, and I had to educate them and any new staff that comes in, because you have to be aware of certain triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So, when my brother gets nervous, his hands go up and he starts to shake his hand. Well, that is an automatic to tell me that he's not comfortable. Something is wrong. He's feeling nervous. Most people would not even look at that, or they would just shy away from it. But that's my first step of saying something's wrong right away. And I jump into that because it's there. When a child or an adult with autism, not all of them can speak out. We have, like we said, autism is so many different levels. So sometimes it's not the verbal communication that we have to look for, but it's actually more of the actions that are happening that we have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think one of the pieces why it makes this such a complicated, disability, and why people are so worried or concerned when they do have this diagnosis, because there is not a one size fits all. Now, I say this all the time. Nobody has a one size fits all, right? Your life plan is different than mine and different than Nicole's, but when it also involves a child and it involves a disability, or eventually an adult and a disability, then those plans have to be really determined for that specific need. And you're right, just listening or talking to someone on the spectrum, so to speak, of autism, you're not going to gather the correct information. You'll gather information, but you're not going to gather the correct information that can help you make the best plan.
Mm. And, you know, I have a question for you about the school system also, because I did read an article a few years back that talked about doctors diagnosing little boys more so than little girls and prescribing them medicines that just calm them down. And that's kind of what teachers wanted because they don't disrupt the classroom.
Mhm.
What is your feeling on that?
So I'm going to talk to you like a principal, and then I'm going to talk to you like a mama.
Okay, perfect.
As the principal, I always said this to my family. This is what we're seeing. Your child is having difficulty concentrating. Your child is having difficulty staying organized, gets very frustrated very easily with work. Or if we're talking about an autism type of disability, your child is having difficulty communicating with others, playing with others, or whatever symptoms we might be seeing. I'm not a doctor. I do think that when you go to your doctor, if you choose to do so, have a conversation about this. We will be happy to share any information with your medical professional. And know that your best medical professionals out there, and again, I'm not a doctor, so this is just the world according to Cheri Dixon, but I do think that I had the obligation as the principal to say a good physician, someone that's going to care about you and your child, is going to exhaust all avenues for remedy before just rushing to medication. Now, some parents want medication because they are also at a point of frustration and just want something to calm down. But I don't think, in my opinion, and I don't take a lot of medication unless it's an absolute need. I don't know if medication is going to fix any problem. It's just going to band-aid problems. What we need to do is we need to be able to figure out what are the best ways, the best solution to help the child be as successful as possible. That's the principal side of me. The mama side of me is, you know, I've seen kids get put on medication so many times and they become a completely different kid. They lose their personality sometimes. They're tired. They don't want to eat. As a mom, I don't know if I could ever make that decision for my daughter unless it was a last resort. I would want to be sure that I've exhausted all of the other resources possible because that's my baby, and it's a touchy subject. It's very controversial. And I can't make the decision for you or for anybody else. I can only make the decision what would be right for my own child. But I think sometimes we're very quick, even as adults, even in society, to just say, take medication, this is going to fix things. And it doesn't ever fix, it just puts a band-aid on it. It provides a remedy for the moment. And of course, there are going to be certain things that people have to take medication for, but things that there may be some other possible solutions first. Why not try those solutions? What do you have to lose? But that's, again, those are just my thoughts. And I'm going to support as an educator. If I were still working in a school, I'm going to support whatever the parent decides to do, right? But I do think that sometimes we have to also educate families on that piece too, because people can be very persuasive. And when you're hearing 100% constant from the teacher, your child is a problem, there's going to be a point where the parent's going to say, I just don't know what else to do. And if a doctor then says, well, we can put them on this medication and it will make life better, that sounds very enticing, right? It sounds like, wow, my life is going to change. And then they don't see the child in the day when they're on the medication. So I think, again, that's where that comes in, at that whole team approach, because you need to know what's happening with your child. And as teachers, what's happening with the child at home. So
I love how you explain that. Having a child, you can explain it, from the mom point as a principal. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can see this is also a big passion of mine. And that's where this whole thing stems from, is because, I have to share, and this is just something that just broke my heart. When I first became a school administrator, I was an assistant principal with a principal that did things a little bit different. And I'll be honest, I always say you learn from people who do the right things and you learn from people who don't do the right things, right?
Sure.
And I was in a situation where I was learning exactly what not to do, right? And I walked down the hall one day, and it was back in about 2005, so almost 20 years ago. And as someone said earlier, things have changed in the world over the last years, and medicine has evolved, and technology has evolved, and even research has evolved with all of these disabilities. But I remember walking down the hall, and I'm in Texas, and we have a state assessment, and it's pretty high stakes. And I looked into a classroom, and I saw this teacher who was an amazing teacher. She had probably 15 of her 22 kids nice up and close to her in the classroom, paying attention to what the lesson was. And then there was about 5 to 7 in the back at a separate table. And I noticed that they were coloring. And I thought, that's not quite what I would expect them to be doing during, we would say it was math class, right? And so I kind of thought, well, I watch for patterns. So the next day I make the same kind of round and I noticed the same thing. And so I stopped and I talked to the teacher, and the teacher said, well, they don't have to take the test this year because they're in special education. And this was how it was back in the day. And I said, so you're not teaching them? And she says, well, I give them a little bit of work and then they get to color. And that was the moment when I realized something has to change with this, because my brother was in special education in school. He's dyslexic. And if that would have happened to my brother, that wouldn't have been okay. And so if it's not okay for my brother, why is it okay for anybody else? And that's when I really got on this path of trying to understand exactly, because special education was not my expertise. I worked more in the bilingual education field, but I needed to do something. And as eventually the school leader of that school, that's when we started to look at different programming and just trying to change the philosophy from both parents and teachers as to that expectation, as we talked about earlier, pushing our kids to do something so they feel successful. But it just broke my heart, and I'll never forget that day. I remember what I was wearing. I remember the weather. I remember the teacher. I remember everything. And I promise you, that teacher wasn't trying to be bad. That's what they knew.
Yeah, that was one of those moments for you, right? Just, yeah, the mic drop moment.
Absolutely.
So on that same pattern, let me ask you, what do you feel about special classes for people with needs, different needs?
That's a very good question. And I don't know if there's one really specific answer. I think everything depends. But I do say this. When we're in, we call it the ARD process here in Texas, but whatever the process is, when you're working with the student, you have to know the student and their needs. And you cannot make one blanket statement or one blanket plan. You have to individualize it, just like what it's called here, an individualized educational plan. And not that I have all the answers, but you work with a team. You work with the parent, you work with the classroom teachers, you work with the special education staff, you work with the school administrator here in the United States. And that team has to look at everything that they can, and they have to understand what would be best before making the plan. For some students, it would be best to be in a special class, maybe separate, because of the level of need. For some students, they could be in a regular classroom with just a little bit of support, depending on the need. What needs to happen, though, is those consistent check-ins, monitoring the data, and making sure maybe in first grade they need this, but by fourth grade it's totally changed to be something else. And so I think that the better you know your programs, the better you know your students, the better you know your child, and the better your team is set up to really look at the data and have the right support. Another thing that I think is super important is we talk in educational jargon so often. And so one of the first things that I did with all of my staffs at the schools that I ran is I had to get them to understand this is what this means. And not that we need to level it down, but we need to be able to explain it in a way that somebody else is going to understand it. That doesn't work in our educational world. If I start throwing acronyms at y'all, like I said, ARD just a few minutes ago, ARD stands for something. It's admission, review, and dismissal. It's the process for special education. That's what we call them here. But you wouldn't have known that had I not stepped back right now and explained that. So I think we have to just really, really understand every situation is going to be so individualized and everything depends on the student.
It also depends on the school, the teacher, and things. You know, there's got to be something said to even special needs children being with other children, because it brings in an inclusiveness that the other students can be cheering on the underdog. There's so much we say because, you know, the world that I grew up in, where there were you know, it's kind of like the haves and the have-nots. And when you push the haves and the have-nots away from each other, then there's no education, there's no ways of understanding, being more compassionate, loving, all of those things that we need to have in our society. So there's that part of life that I think, in my opinion, you know, it's a balance, right? And and to the teachers, the school, and the up aboves to realize what that balance is. But I think that our everybody today has to learn that, you know, we're not all 100% in everything we do. And we can cheer and help each other along wherever we fall short. Somebody's there that might be able to pick up, you know, to help you move along.
That's absolutely correct. And that's why it's so important. I think it starts with, like you said, upper admin, because you need to know these kids. I sat with teachers when we would design classes for the upcoming year. And before we placed any of our students with more needs, right? Whether they've been identified with something or not, I'm very purposeful about which teachers get which kids, and if we're going to be having new people in and what kind of kids go into those classes. It's just part of we're striving for success, and why set somebody up for failure. The other piece is really focusing on building relationships. We're building relationships in my schools. We're not going to have kids left behind. I just did my courses for that new teacher program for December and released them, and the second piece of material was talking about just that. You need to think about who are the children that you work with each day in the school. Put them out on a card. I did this with my staff so many different times. Every student would be written on an index card. They would be placed out on a set of tables. We would make these rounds, and I'd tell the staff, as we go around, each time pick up one card of a student you know. And then after we did that so many times, maybe 10 rounds, 15 rounds, whatever it was, depending on the number, what students were left? And that made me go, wow, this number of students still sitting on this table, why are they here? We don't know them, we don't have a connection with them, or we don't like them, right? Because I'm just going to be real, right? That's the name of your show. Let's get real.
Yeah.
And so then my challenge was, now everybody takes one or two or whatever the number was, and you got to get to know this kid. This is your assignment for the next quarter. And it made such a huge difference, because those kids that typically get left behind or get sat in the back of the room with color sheets or whatever the situation is, they're going to be noticed and they're going to be connected to. And that's going to be a life changer.
Totally. I love that.
Cheri, I'm curious, is Asperger's grouped into this spectrum, or is that kind of something on its own?
It is. And I believe, you know, in the United States, I think we're trying to get away from the Asperger's, the spectrum, the autism. I don't have all of the details at this point, but I know it's been categorized under that umbrella of neurodiversity. But of course, neurodiversity now also includes ADHD, ADD and ADHD. So I think that, there's still some transition going on. But if you are to think about that former term of Asperger's, and some people use it still, depending on your state, yes. And it's a little different, very high functioning, but you can also see some of the characteristics. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
So if you were to now speak directly to a parent with a child, what would be some of the advice, or as they're entering into the school year, or a child who might be having difficulties in the school year? What advice would you give them?
Good question. I think, of course, as I mentioned before, really form that bond with the teacher. Really make sure you have open communication. Don't be embarrassed. It is what it is. Let's just make sure we're supporting the child, because we want to love your child as much as you love your child, and you want us to love your child, right? I think the other piece is that honesty. Be honest when you see something. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And that can be anything in regard to your child, and for any parent. But I think specifically, if you already notice that your child's having some difficulties, I think it's even more important just to be honest. We're not here to judge you. And if there's a teacher you feel is judging you, go talk to the principal, because that's not okay. And maybe they didn't mean to, and maybe it was their personality or whatever, but it just needs to be addressed. And then finally, go to every meeting you can. Go to get involved. Be there as much as you can. We know you have to work. We know that you have other commitments and responsibilities, but as often as you can, be part of the community. Be part of the solution, so that your child is getting the very, very best thing. And finally, I would say keep those expectations high for everybody, for the child, for the teacher, for the school, for the principal. Hold us accountable, and we're going to hold you accountable, because that's the only way we make the programming better.
And most importantly, hold your child accountable too.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
having a having something, a learning disability, doesn't mean that they can't learn. It might mean that they're maybe slower at learning, but remember, everybody has their little genius zones about them. It is really
Absolutely.
wonderful, and it's fun trying to learn what they are and building on those areas as well.
You're so right. And what's fun, what is amazing, is when you start to see the light bulb go off, right? The light in the child's eyes when they do realize that they can do something that they never thought they could. And it's so precious. And when the parent sees it as well, and the teacher, it's just one of those things where I remember talking to a family right before I left this last job, and we had some challenges along the way, and they came to me at the beginning of their child's schooling and was leaving out in 5th grade. And um, I said to them, I am just so proud of the work we've done together. And the child was there too. And he looked at me, and I said, yes, you too, because we did this together as a team, and we would never have accomplished this. Look where you are now. And when that family walked out of that auditorium that night of the awards, and they walked differently, and they held themselves differently, that's going to spark more success.
And that's what it is. It's creating, once they feel that they've celebrated some form of success, that success can be built on, and that's the secret right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. I love that you did that. If we had my kids were very lucky. They had a principal similar to you in their elementary school. But I have to tell you, you would have been right up there with him. I just love the fact that you include the children and the praise, and everybody wants to feel good. Parents want to feel good. The child wants to feel good. They want to tell someone what the principal said about them. So kudos to you. That's amazing.
Thank you. And I have to say, I do appreciate all of that, but that's what the principal seat is about, right? It's definitely running the school efficiently and effectively, but you're the head teacher. That's what you are as a principal, a head teacher. And you are the one that everybody's going to come to. So I would just throw this out there. If you're one of those principals that you don't know your kids and you don't know your parents and you don't know your why for being there and what lights every single one of those people in your building up, work on that, because that's what's going to get you far. My daughter was sharing with me that she's just experiencing a little bit different climate and culture at her current school. And we were talking about that just this morning. If you're not focused on climate and culture and building those relationships, it doesn't matter what else you have in place because it's not going to work.
Wow.
And it's so true that life is all about relationships and building one another upon those. And that's what it's, no matter who that person is, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whether it's a teacher, it doesn't matter. It's all built on the relationships together.
Well, think about this. This project would not be moving forward without the relationships that I have built over the years.
True.
Because what's going to happen is people that I worked with in the schools, families, people that I worked with that are educators or directors or now doing whatever, people that I've come across through this work that I'm doing now. That's what's going to build this project. It's not going to be about just Cheri Dixon sitting in front of you, giving you a lot of statistics. It's their real life journey. And I couldn't have done that if I didn't have those relationships. So it just shows you are so right on that. We are about people. And if you think life is anything different, well, I don't know,
Missing the boat.
because I can help you.
No, and you're missing out. You're missing out on so much if you don't include your people.
Absolutely.
That's what bonds us. That's what keeps me sane. And I love what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, Cheri, can you tell me when you are expect or the name of your program that's going to be coming out so people can keep an eye out for it?
Yes. So for sure, I want to start really marketing by February 2024 for sure. But this again is a big announcement day, so that's exciting. I don't have a title yet, but I am working on timelines, getting ready to schedule my first Zoom meeting because I have people, like I said, from all over the world participating. So I want to get started with laying that foundation, really figuring out what the episodes are going to look like. I believe it will be 8 episodes, and they'll drop 1 episode per week starting April 1st. So it will basically run through from April 1st, probably through the end of May. Of course, we'll pre-record, we'll have the title, we'll have it all together by then. But it's just, I'm so looking forward to getting started. It's like one of those things, the more we talk about it here, inside my body is just going, okay, come on, girl, let's go.
It's exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so anybody who's interested in, just keep an eye and watch Cheri on her Facebook, Cheri Dixon, and you'll see when it's introduced out, so that you can capture it on. You said all different. What is it? Apple TV.
Apple and
Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and then through Phoenix TV app as well. So yeah, we'll get all of that out, and everybody who is a part of the project, I'm going to be on them as well, putting it out on their social media. So Glenda, get ready, because I am honored to have met you and know that you're going to be part of this project as well. I don't know if you were ready for me to announce that.
Well, I'm totally ready for it. It's my part of it. It's my journey in my own life as well, to help other families, so that like I've said, I'm not an educator. I'm not a doctor. I've just lived through 64 years of it, and I live by what I've learned, and I'm here to teach others, so that makes life maybe a little bit easier for somebody.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm excited to have you in the project, because you have the same philosophy. it's all about impacting others. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, Cheri, I am so blessed. We are to have you on come again, and we will definitely be putting it out there. And hopefully, you'll come back once this airs as well, and we can have another conversation of how it went and sharing with others. Because you know what, you know the old saying of sharing is caring, and it's totally true in this case. So thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some incredible knowledge out there. Anybody wants to find out more about what Cheri is doing or helping their child who has special needs that may need a little bit more, you can reach out to Cheri. Her link is in the bio, so you're more than welcome to touch base. If I can be of any help to anybody, it would be my extreme pleasure. And of course, Nicole, we're all here to help and to help others to shine. And that's really what it's about in our world.
Well, thank you, ladies. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day and happy holidays.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, really. And Nicole, can you give us some little wise wisdom?
Yeah, I will. And my daughter worked with disabilities children and in her high school and junior high for probably 8 to 10 years. That was her platform. And so I've been around that for so long. Had my second daughter lived, she would have had Down syndrome. And that's how my daughter got started in that, as I told her about her sister. And there's no bigger truth than the fact that they just want to feel like everyone else. They want to be treated the same. They want to be respected or give them kudos, but they're human. We're all human. And they have hearts bigger than the outdoors. And so when you talk about, Cheri, about, people walking out standing a bit taller, if just a few mere words can help someone, please let them know how special they are. I do that. I do that as often as I can. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
It's like a muscle.
Yes, yes.
So thank you very much for joining us today on this very special Let's Get Real. Let's get real about who is out there today. There is nothing better in our world than helping each other to build each other high. It's a funny thing that when we build ourselves or we build others high, it comes back to us again because we can feel it in our own hearts. So stop for a moment, and if somebody is struggling, reach out a hand. You know what? It might take a moment, maybe take a smile, but it will be years in their eyes and in their hearts. Thank you. Remember to share us. Remember that it's all about loving each other and learning that we can all be special in our own ways. Thank you so much.